Seth Myers emerged from behind his desk with his trademark smirk, but something felt different tonight. His usual warmth seemed forced, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. As the applause died down, he launched into his opening remarks with an edge that caught both Lawrence and the audience off guard. "So, Jennifer, you're here to talk about your new film, but I have to ask, you've been pretty vocal lately about Hollywood's treatment of women. Some might say you've become quite the activist," Myers began, his tone dripping with barely concealed condescension. "Tell me, is this newfound social consciousness genuine, or just good publicity?" The question landed like a slap. Lawrence's smile faltered for just a moment before she composed herself, but the damage was already done. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the unexpected hostility in what should have been a friendly exchange. "I'm sorry. What exactly are you implying, Seth?" Lawrence responded, her voice steady but with an unmistakable edge. "That caring about equality is somehow fake? That standing up for what's right is just a publicity stunt?" Myers leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the discomfort he'd created. "Well, let's be honest here. You've made millions playing characters that young girls look up to, yet you've stayed silent on these issues for years. It's only now, when it's trendy and profitable to speak out, that you've found your voice. Don't you think that's a little convenient?" The accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. Lawrence's publicist, seated in the front row, looked panicked. This wasn't the agreed-upon interview direction. They had specifically discussed focusing on her upcoming film and her recent charity work. Nothing controversial, nothing that would put her in a defensive position. "Convenient?" Lawrence repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You think speaking out about sexual harassment and pay inequality is convenient? Do you have any idea what it's like to be a woman in this industry? To have your worth questioned constantly? To be paid less than your male co-stars? To deal with inappropriate behavior from powerful men?" Myers shrugged dismissively, as if her concerns were trivial complaints rather than serious systemic issues. "Come on, Jennifer. You're one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood. You've had unprecedented success. It's hard to feel sorry for someone who's made hundreds of millions of dollars and then complains about being a victim." The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the crowd began to murmur disapprovingly. This wasn't the playful banter they'd come to expect from late-night television. This was something darker, meaner, and completely inappropriate. Lawrence's eyes flashed with anger, but she maintained her composure with impressive restraint. "So because I've been successful, I should stay quiet about the problems other women face? Because I've worked hard and achieved something, I should ignore the harassment and discrimination that's rampant in this industry? I'm just saying," Myers continued, doubling down on his attack, "it's easy to play the victim card when you're sitting in a mansion in Beverly Hills. Maybe focus on your acting instead of trying to be some kind of social justice warrior. Stick to what you know." The words hit like a physical blow. Lawrence sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing the sheer audacity of what had just been said to her on national television. The audience was now openly uncomfortable, with some people actually booing Myers' comments. But Myers wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his expression smug and self-satisfied. "And while we're being honest, let's talk about your recent comments about the film industry's treatment of women. You blamed the system, blamed men in power, blamed everyone except yourself. But haven't you benefited from that same system? Haven't you worked with directors and producers who you now claim are problematic?" Lawrence's hands clenched into fists in her lap, her knuckles white with tension. This had crossed every line of professional courtesy and basic human decency. "You know what, Seth?" Lawrence's voice cut through the studio like a blade, her famous composure finally cracking. "I came here tonight to promote my film and have a pleasant conversation, but instead you've decided to ambush me with this disgusting line of questioning. What exactly is your problem?" Myers seemed to relish her anger, his eyes lighting up with malicious glee. My problem? I don't have a problem. I'm just asking the tough questions that other hosts are too scared to ask. Someone needs to call out the hypocrisy in Hollywood. And apparently that someone is me. Hypocrisy? Lawrence shot back, her voice rising to match his smugness. The only hypocrite I see here is a man who makes jokes about powerful men's behavior while simultaneously trying to tear down a woman for speaking out against it. You're literally proving my point about how women are treated when they dare to have opinions. The studio audience was now clearly divided. Some applauded Lawrence's response, while others sat in shocked silence at the unprecedented hostility unfolding before them. The show's producers in the control room were frantically gesturing to Myers, trying to signal him to change direction, but he was completely ignoring their attempts at damage control. Myers laughed, but there was no humor in it, only cruelty. Oh, so now I'm the bad guy for asking legitimate questions? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle being challenged, so you immediately play the gender card. It's pathetic, really. Gender card? Lawrence's eyes blazed with fury. Are you kidding me right now? You just told me to stick to what I know and focus on my acting, instead of speaking out about serious issues that affect millions of women. If that's not sexist, I don't know what is. I'm telling you to be honest about your motivations, Myers fired back, his voice growing nastier with each exchange. You want to be seen as this brave truth-teller. But where was this courage when Harvey Weinstein was still running around Hollywood? Where was your voice then? The mention of Weinstein sent a visible shock through Lawrence's system. Her face went pale, then flushed red with rage. The audience gasped again, several people shouting their disapproval at Myers' tactics. How dare you, Lawrence whispered, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury. How dare you use that monster's name to try to shame me? You have no idea what any of us went through, what we were afraid of, what we had to navigate just to survive in this industry. But Myers pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the growing outrage in the studio. I'm just saying, it's convenient. Timing? The movement happens, it becomes safe to speak out. And suddenly Jennifer Lawrence is leading the charge. Where's the authenticity in that? Lawrence stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. The sudden movement sent a ripple of tension through the audience. Authenticity? You want to talk about authenticity? Let me tell you what's authentic. The fear I felt walking into rooms with powerful men. The sick feeling in my stomach when I had to laugh at inappropriate jokes to keep my career alive. The shame I felt for staying quiet because I was terrified of being blacklisted. Her voice was now shaking with emotion, years of suppressed trauma and anger pouring out in front of millions of viewers. What's authentic is the guilt I carry for not speaking up sooner, for not protecting other women who didn't have the privilege of success that I had. What's authentic is trying to use whatever platform I have now to make things better for the next generation. Myers remained unmoved by her raw honesty, his expression cold and calculating. That's a nice speech, but actions speak louder than words. You've worked with men who everyone knew were problematic. You took their money, you smiled in their photos, you thanked them in your acceptance speeches. And now you want us to believe you're some kind of feminist hero? The accusation was like a physical slap. Lawrence staggered slightly, her hand gripping the back of her chair for support. The audience was now openly hostile toward Myers, with boos and shouts of shame echoing throughout the studio. You're despicable, Lawrence said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of absolute contempt. You're using my trauma, my guilt, my pain as entertainment. You're exploiting the very real struggles that women in this industry face just to create controversy for your failing show. Myers' mask finally slipped completely, revealing the bitter, resentful man beneath. Failing show? My ratings are just fine, thank you very much. Unlike some people, I don't need to manufacture outrage to stay relevant. The insult hit its mark, but instead of backing down, Lawrence seemed to find a new reservoir of strength. Her posture straightened, Her voice became steady and controlled, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made the entire studio hold its breath. "Manufacture outrage?" she repeated slowly, each word dripping with disdain. "Is that what you think this is? You think sexual harassment is manufactured? You think pay inequality is made up? You think the systematic silencing of women's voices is some kind of publicity stunt?" Myers opened his mouth to respond, but Lawrence wasn't finished. The floodgates had opened, and years of frustration came pouring out with devastating precision. "You want to know what's really pathetic, Seth?" A middle-aged man so threatened by women speaking their truth that he has to tear them down on national television to feel powerful. "You're exactly the kind of man we're talking about when we discuss toxic behavior in this industry." The audience erupted in applause, but Myers wasn't ready to concede defeat. His face flushed red with embarrassment and rage. He leaned forward aggressively. "Don't you dare lecture me about toxic behavior. I've been nothing but respectful to my guests for years. I've interviewed hundreds of women without incident. Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's you." "Respectful?" Lawrence let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the stunned studio. "You call this respectful? You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to humiliate me, questioning my integrity, dismissing my experiences, and using my trauma against me. If this is your idea of respect, I'd hate to see what you consider hostile." Myers stood up now too, his professional facade completely abandoned. "You know what? I'm tired of walking on eggshells around people like you. Everything is offensive. Everything is problematic. Everything is harassment. Maybe if you spent less time playing the victim and more time taking responsibility for your own choices, you wouldn't need to blame everyone else for your problems." The words hung in the air like poison. Several audience members actually stood up and started walking toward the exits, unable to stomach any more of Myers' vicious attack. His own band members looked mortified, staring at their instruments rather than witness their boss's spectacular meltdown. Lawrence stood perfectly still for a moment, absorbing the full impact of what had just been said to her. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried the force of absolute moral authority. "You want to talk about taking responsibility? Let me tell you about responsibility, Seth. Responsibility is admitting when you're wrong. It's listening to people who have different experiences than you. It's using your platform to lift others up, not tear them down. It's recognizing that just because something didn't happen to you doesn't mean it didn't happen at all." She took a step closer, to his desk, her presence commanding despite Myers towering over her. "What you're doing right now, attacking a woman for speaking out about injustice. This is exactly why women stayed silent for so long. Because men like you punish us for telling the truth." Myers sneered, his contempt now fully on display. "Truth? Your truth, maybe. But there are two sides to every story, and Hollywood loves to rewrite history to make themselves look better. You all love to play the victim when it's convenient." "Two sides?" Lawrence's voice cracked with disbelief. "There are two sides to sexual harassment? There are two sides to being paid less than your male colleagues for the same work? There are two sides to being told to smile and look pretty while men make decisions about your career?" The studio was now in complete chaos. Audience members were shouting at Myers. His producers were frantically trying to signal for a commercial break, and security guards had positioned themselves near the stage, sensing the situation was spiraling completely out of control. But Myers seemed energized by the chaos he'd created, feeding off the negative energy like some kind of emotional vampire. "All I'm saying is that maybe, just maybe, some of these stories get exaggerated. Maybe some of these accusations are overblown. Maybe some people see opportunity in victimhood." The accusation was so outrageous, so callously dismissive of real suffering, that it seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Lawrence stared at him in absolute horror, as if she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "Overblown," she whispered. her voice barely audible but somehow heard by everyone in the dead-silent studio. Accusations are overblown? Victimhood is an opportunity? Her voice began to rise again, powered by righteous fury. You just dismissed every woman who has ever been brave enough to come forward. You just told millions of viewers that women who speak out about abuse are probably lying. The words reverberated through the studio like thunderclaps. Myers seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, that he had gone too far. His face began to pale as the full weight of what he'd said sank in, but his ego wouldn't let him back. Down now? I didn't say they were lying, he stammered, finally showing a crack in his aggressive facade. I just think sometimes things get blown out of proportion, that's all. No, Lawrence said firmly, her voice now steady as steel. You don't get to walk that back. You don't get to soften it or explain it away. You just told the world that women who speak out about harassment and assault are exaggerating for attention. You are part of the problem, Seth. You are exactly why women don't come forward. She turned to address the audience directly, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. This is what we face every single day. This dismissal, this questioning of our experiences, this assumption that we're making things up or overreacting. This is why it took so long for women to speak out about Harvey Weinstein, about Roger Ailes, about all the others. Myers, sensing he was losing complete control of the narrative, made one final desperate attempt to regain the upper hand. Look, I think we're all getting a little emotional here. Maybe we should take a step back and… Emotional? Lawrence cut him off, her voice like a whip crack. Of course, blame it on women being emotional. That's the oldest trick in the book, isn't it? When a woman stands up for herself, she's being emotional. When a woman refuses to be silenced, she's being dramatic. When a woman demands respect, she's being difficult. The audience began to applaud again, but Lawrence held up her hand for silence. She had something more to say, and everyone sensed this was her moment of truth. You want to know what's really emotional, Seth? A grown man so insecure about his own relevance that he has to attack women to feel important. A host so desperate for ratings that he's willing to traumatize his guests on live television. A person so threatened by women's voices that he has to shout them down to feel heard. Myers' face was now bright red, sweat beading on his forehead. Now wait just a minute. No, I'm done waiting, Lawrence declared, her voice ringing with finality. I'm done being polite to men who don't deserve it. I'm done making excuses for behavior like this. And I'm done participating in this circus. She began walking toward the edge of the stage, her movements deliberate and dignified despite the chaos surrounding her. Myers, panicking at the thought of his guest leaving mid-interview, called out desperately after her, Jennifer, come on, don't leave like this. We can work this out. Let's just talk about your movie. Lawrence stopped dead in her tracks and turned back to face him one final time. Now you want to talk about my movie? After spending the entire interview attacking my character and dismissing my experiences? It's too late for that, Seth. She looked directly into the camera, speaking to the millions of viewers watching at home. To anyone out there who has been told their experiences don't matter, who has been silenced or dismissed or called a liar, your voice matters. Your truth matters. And you don't have to tolerate being treated like this by anyone, no matter how powerful they think they are. With that, she walked off the stage with her head held high, leaving Myers standing alone behind his desk, speechless, for perhaps the first time in his career. The audience erupted in thunderous applause, giving Lawrence a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Myers, realizing the magnitude of his public relations disaster, tried one last time to salvage the situation. Well, that was unexpected. We'll be right back after this commercial break, folks. But the damage was already done. Social media exploded with clips of the confrontation within minutes. The hashtag #ShaRespectJennifer began trending worldwide. Myers' own network received thousands of complaints before the show had even finished airing. Media outlets immediately picked up the story, with headlines condemning Myers' behavior and praising Lawrence's dignified response. By the next morning, 3 major advertisers had pulled their sponsorship from Myers' show. His ratings, which he had so proudly defended during the interview, plummeted to their lowest levels in years. Industry colleagues who had remained silent about Myers' reputation for difficult behavior suddenly found their voices, sharing stories of his past conduct behind the scenes. The confrontation became a defining moment in the ongoing conversation about respect and professionalism in entertainment, with Lawrence's powerful exit serving as a masterclass in maintaining dignity while refusing to tolerate unacceptable behavior. What started as a routine promotional interview had become a watershed moment that would be remembered and studied for years to come, cementing Lawrence's reputation not just as a talented actress, but as a woman of principle who refused to be silenced.